something I wanted to actually look at was, which I haven't, is the comparison between Harry, Meghan and the Beckham family and what is going on. And, you know, when you look at the power, the, you know, loyalty and the cost of going public, I think that, you know, the comparisons are very apparent. So if you want to, so if you're interested in something of this, where you're, you know, it's not just regurgitating what is in the mainstream media, it's delving into the psychological aspect of what is going on in the world of celebrity, the royal family, then this could be the channel for you. I break down body language and behaviour, not just looking at what we're being told, but reading between the lines. So as you've got this far, go grab your drink of choice, sit back, relax, as we get into some tea, some truth, with a touch of therapeutic psychology. So I've got my trusty notes. So in my opinion, this was never about a wedding, but weirdly enough, we do see the polarity of, we do see the similarity between Brooklyn and Nicola's wedding. That seemed to be like wedding gate, when things seem to start happening. And I do feel, even though there was not really anything specific, aside from we did see and hear some things that happened between Meghan, Catherine and Princess Charlotte, but I do feel there was this pivot where Meghan sort of went from this doughy-eyed, oh my gosh, I'm, you know, Harry's the leader, to, oh, I've got him now and I'm going to now take over. So I do feel there was definitely that aspect. So when we look at the Beckhams, you know, you can look at it from, and again, even with Harry, it's like, you know, one version simplifies it by, you know, a son grew up, he got married, he chose his wife. But then the other version, which I think their fans don't want to look at, it creates them to feel a little bit uncomfortable, is that what we're actually watching is entitlement, ego, and a public narrative being used as leverage against powerful families. So I'm going to explore both of those, because as I said, I don't feel this was just about a first dance or the wedding, etc. This was something that was going on underneath. So when we look at Brooklyn and Nicola, you know, one of the things that I think people are often looking at, which is what Nicola has stated, is that Victoria overshadowed Nicola. And this was supposedly at the wedding. We know of the first dance. We know that other things have come out since then that says that Brooklyn's narrative isn't true. But, you know, this is something that was symbolic. And so to her, Nicola, this was something that she felt that Victoria took from her. So we're being told. But the thing is here is weddings, something like this doesn't create a fracture the way that this has been done. But what it can do is it sort of it exposes already existing fault lines. And I think that a wedding signifies like this public like transfer of allegiance. You know, it went from Brooklyn sort of being quite loyal to his family, even having a tattoo of, you know, mama's boy, and suddenly he's got a wife now. So there's this almost like transfer of allegiance. And that's normal to some degree, but it should blend nicely. There really shouldn't be necessarily like almost like this significant transfer. It's like, this is my wife, but she becomes like a blended part of the family. And that's how it should be. But in these instances, it wasn't. So like I say, usually there's this, the husband, the wife is my primary loyalty now. And like I said, for most families, that's healthy and accepted. But when you have a very structured family, very cohesive family, and very image conscious families, that shift can sometimes feel destabilizing. Not because love disappears, but because the hierarchy changes. But that is if you're going to believe Nicola's version of events, and Nicola and Brooklyn, the way that they have publicly framed this. You know, The other thing as well is that the Beckham family, it's not just about them being a family, they're a brand. So, the Beckham, everything in a sense is brand Beckham. We know that. And I would imagine that part of what goes on within that is the fact that they have to have this structure, and that is in a sense is normal, because obviously we know how the media play things. We know, I've watched both of Beckham documentary and Victoria's documentary, and you can see how the way the paparazzi, especially in the mainstream media, have really damaged trust within the Beckham family. And so I completely understand them closing ranks and wanting to keep that control and not let their children be bullied, not go through what they've gone through. And I completely understand that. I think anyone in the public eye would probably be the same. And then you look at Harry and Meghan, and Harry was raised in a similar way. Their whole family was public fodder, the things that have been said in the media. So again, you can understand why the royal family want to keep things contained. They don't want the paparazzi, the mainstream media, to just run away with things. So again, very, very similar. You also have the fact that Nicola and Meghan are deemed as strong women, dominant women. So this is all just looking at it from how this is being portrayed. But you've also got the men. This isn't just about women, this is also the men. So you've got Brooklyn and Harry. And when you look at them in comparison to their wives, they seem very emotional. There's a bit of a victim mentality going on. And this is why it shows more so that Nicola and Meghan are kind of dominant women. To some degree, I would call them beta male. Now, up until this point, this is kind of how things are being portrayed, right? But then you have the public shift, and this is the pivot. What if this is not about parents letting go? It's not about the royal family wanting to keep Harry in the royal family and keep him tethered, not allowed to grow, as he's put it. And the same with Brooklyn. His family want to keep him controlled. This is how this starts to look. So what you have is now we've got a generation that learns victimhood gets me attention. Victimhood is power. We live in a world now where hurt becomes a narrative. It's a story. And that narrative then becomes influence. Influence then becomes leverage. Brooklyn didn't quietly distance himself. He didn't just go off into the sunset with Nicola and live his life happily. Meghan and Harry didn't just leave in 2020 and go off into live their private life. No. That's not what they did at all. Brooklyn and Nicola made statements about aligning themselves together, separating themselves from the Beckhams. Harry and Meghan started doing interviews, started separating themselves in a definitive way. Harry gave interviews, released a memoir. Brooklyn, big old statement on Instagram. These weren't private conversations between families and each other. This was suddenly public. And when you look at how the royal family have been hurt very much by the paparazzi in the past and the mainstream media in the past, how the Beckham family have been very much hurt by the mainstream media and the paparazzi in the past, this even makes it even a little bit more egregious, because those families, those Harry, Meghan, more so Brooklyn and maybe Harry, they knew this. And it makes it even worse, in my opinion, that they then went out and did this. When they're talking about, oh, this is empowerment, we're empowering ourselves, stepping away from our families, what it actually is it's retaliation put out as public healing. And that is very damaging and very unhealthy. It's, we need space, but we still need you to financially support. We still need you for relevance. We still need you to have some clout, because without that, we're not really anything. So it's like, no, don't be too much. Don't do this, but yes, please do this. Or don't do that, but we want that. And then the bottom line after all of this is somewhere along the way, you've hurt me, so I'm now going to hurt you 1,000,000 times more. And when you see that, it changes everything. It stops where it becomes, oh, well, Brooklyn and Nicola are just separating themselves from the Beckhams because they're so controlling, and Harry and Meghan are just separating themselves because the royal family are so controlling. It then changes everything. And then you look at these two, and of course these two are aligning together as couples, makes perfect sense. When you add in the fact that Nicola's family are billionaires, and let's not go into the fact there's also an Epstein connection there, you know, and then we've got Meghan, who I've just done a video on her connection with Andrew. There's something hinky there, you know, so it's not surprising that these four are possibly coming together to align and in this shared, oh, my family. You know, in modern celebrity culture, storytelling is powerful. We know that we're seeing it all the time in celebrities. They feel the need to share everything now for some reason. And in a sense, the person that controls the narrative tends to control the sympathy. And people who now, you know, celebrities are now using this as currency and as influence. You know, they're using her and they're positioning that her. They're weaponizing what they're doing. And they're doing it not just to random everyday people, but they're doing it to their families. And that's where the Beckhams and Harry and Meghan, they intersect. Is there authentic pain there? Maybe with Harry, I'd say possibly there's some underlying something there. Doesn't excuse behaviour. Meghan, maybe connected to her mother. Again, doesn't excuse behaviour. Same with Brooklyn. Maybe there is something there with Brooklyn. I don't know. Nicola, again, don't know. But again, it doesn't excuse behaviour. And here's the thing: if we're gonna slot this into our own world and the real world scenario of like you and I and families, etc., you can have a family member that feels that you have done something wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does become wrong then, instead of talking to you, which is what these two, they should have done, is that what they should instead say, this person that you know, this family member you know, then goes and publishes all these lies on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, does a YouTube video attacking you as a family. That's different. That's when it takes it to a whole new level. And this is where I feel that these four are very wrong. Instead of being discussed privately, they then took this to another level. They used the public media, in a sense, to further attack their own families. The problem you then also have when couples bond through shared opposition, that in a sense, bond intensifies. And a lot of that can be is because they don't have anybody else. Now, I think that this is what we're seeing with Harry and Meghan as well now, is that because they've isolated their families, they don't really have a friend base. So they're now coming together in this shared, like going after the monarchy, going after the royal family, trying to position themselves as almost like a pseudo royals over in America. They're coming together probably to do that. Not necessarily like physically, but just they're all they've got in each other. And I would imagine that Brooklyn and Nicola are going to do something similar, albeit that Nicola has got her family and Brooklyn is probably quite happily utilising that given they're billionaires. So I think that you've got these men, Brooklyn and Harry, who are utilising these dominant women who seem to be running the show. They're not completely innocent in all of this because, like I say, they are doing things that are very damaging towards their own families. But it's interesting that they have both found what I would look at as almost displaying narcissistic traits. So they've found women with narcissistic traits. So when you look at adult children who publicly attack their own families, to some that's courage. But actually what it is it's emotional immaturity. Because in a sense, most healthy people wouldn't behave this way. You know, if you're healthy and you're emotionally healthy within yourself, you know that this is not the right way to go. But when you're looking for attention, when you're needing some kind of validation, you're looking at it from outside of yourself, outside of your inner circle. And this is what Harry and Meghan have done and what Brooklyn and Nicola have done. You know, when wives are labelled controlling, to some that's misogyny. But actually, it's also factually true. There are plenty of women, as much as there are men, who are equally controlling, who do incredibly damaging things in a relationship. That's factually true. It is not fair to always say, oh, this is all on the man. You know, women can be terrible too. They both can. When you have parents that resist change, is that love? Or is it a loss of control? You know, it could be one of those things, but you look at the picture as a whole, and what I feel is what I'm seeing are families that are very hurt and feel probably betrayed by how their child has behaved. Beckhams and Harry, you know, the royal family may operate on a slightly different scale, but underneath it's a similar thing. You know, it's power shifting, hierarchy challenging, victimhood weaponized, you know, attacking a family. You know, the older generation wants privacy, wants to deal with this privately, whereas the younger generation feel the need to blab it everywhere and to whomever will listen. But underneath it all, you know, even though they're celebrities, when you strip it back, it's about two families. It is about, you know, an older generational family that have raised their kid to be a certain way. And for some reason, this kid has married a dominant woman, you know, an adult kid, married a dominant woman, have raised their kids to be a certain way. Somewhere along the way, that kid has turned into an adult and married a dominant woman, and they have, it's released whatever it is that's inside of them. I think we've seen this version of Harry for a while. Brooklyn, maybe not so much. But there at the earlier stages, we've seen a lot of Harry and Meghan. We've had years of it. So it's all there. And I think that instead of always blaming the parents, we do have to say that at some point, you know, Harry is not this 12, 13-year-old kid walking behind his mother's coffin. You know, he's a grown adult. He knows what he's doing. He knows what his wife is doing. And same with Brooklyn. He's not this young kid. He's a grown man. And sometimes you have to let go with love. Sometimes when the toxicity is so much, as hard as what it is, you have to let go and let them find their own way. And maybe at some point they'll come back. But sometimes if the damage is too much, then sometimes it's okay to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's difficult, and I understand that. You know, I understand that more than most, you know, being my job. But sometimes, you know, you're not there to be their verbal punch bag. You're not there to be someone that they can keep kicking and kicking because they're acting out. These are adult men. And like I say, they have chosen the wife they've chosen. Sometimes you just have to make your bed and lie in it, as my nan used to say. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have your own thoughts and opinions on this? Is there anything else that you would like me to look at? Because I am going to try to be looking into other things other than Harry and Meghan, purely and simply because I know many of us are bored. I'm still going to be covering them, but I just want to look into other people as well. So is there anyone that you are seeing on the internet right now that you want me to do a bit of a deep dive into? I'm also going to be bringing some crime here because as much as I have my coffee and crime channel, I'm realizing I can't keep starting new channels. I need to just maybe incorporate everything here. The reality check with M's one is still coming. That's going to be different, but yeah, so I'm going to be doing lots of things here. So is there anything that you want me to do a breakdown in? Let me know in the comments, and if I get a lot of you, then I will do that. And obviously we've also got the Zoom chat, which will be coming soon. So if you want to join that, email me. Everything else, description box below. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, hype, share, comment. And that being said, I'll see you in the next video. And as always, I love you, I appreciate you, but most of all, I respect you. Take care. Bye-bye. Mwah.